Hi, I'm Shane.
And I'm Alex.
And this is the RPM podcast.
Thank you for joining us for the post-race discussion for the Monaco Grand Prix. Oh, Monaco, we do like to have a little whinge at the paucity of wheel-to-wheel action here, don't we? But as we didn't get to see the streets of Monte Carlo last season, I actually think it was quite a welcome return to F1's ultimate challenge. And although there were a couple of moments where, much like the broadcast director, I realised I might not have been fully paying attention, we still got treated to a decent number of dramatic moments both before and during the race, as well as a great set of results as Max Verstappen and Red Bull take the win and lead both world championships respectively. So Shane, there's all that and more to chat about. Over to you to get us started on the big talking points of the weekend.
Okay, so we'll start where it all began this weekend, and that's in practice on a Thursday. So an unusual running for the Monaco. Well, not unusual for Monaco because practice is always held on a Thursday and a Saturday and not on the traditional Friday. But I just want to point out, and this is a bit of a highlight throughout the whole weekend, and I wasn't going to touch on it too soon, but there wasn't as many accidents as I thought there was going to be, given the caliber of drivers on the grid, and that's not taking that's not downplaying anyone, but we've got a lot of rookies, got a lot of people. This is their first time at Monaco. I mentioned it last week in the podcast. I thought there was going to be lots of accidents and lots of yellow flags, but actually, yes, there was a couple through practice, and we had those issues on qualifying, which we'll talk about in a second. But for the race itself, no yellow flags and no safety car, which is unheard of for Monaco. I mean, I think the statistic is 90% chance of safety car for the race.
That's what they were saying.
And almost 100% chance of a yellow flag. And yet, somehow, we had nothing, which is great for safety, but yeah, didn't really play into any strategies, which I think some teams were hoping for. But let's take it all the way back to practice. Did anyone really stand out for you? Because for me, Ferrari in practice 2 were the shock of the session. I think they finished P1 and P2, and that's when I thought, hold on a second, Ferrari, I might have some pace this weekend.
They did look to be back in business this weekend, didn't they? I think that what I remember as well from free practice is there was one accident where I think it was Mick Schumacher lost it in Casino, possibly. Or maybe that was the one he did in qualifying. But yeah, I don't remember too much from free practice. It was mostly just people getting used to what the cars were like round the track. Some of the rookies here will have never been to Monaco, despite being in for 2 seasons, like Latifi, for example.
Yeah,
obviously joined last season, but this was his first time around Monaco. But Ferrari, yeah, they were the standout in free practice. It seemed like there could be a bit of a shake-up. Mercedes didn't appear to be firing up to the top of the leaderboards in quite the way that we may have expected, especially Hamilton, who is pretty skilled around these streets. The same was also true, sadly, for Daniel Ricciardo. I was expecting to see him, fire up. We'll chat a little bit about Daniel Ricciardo later. This was obviously pointed as a good track for him. He's a winner here, almost a 2-time winner.
Yeah,
very
we won't
close.
go into that too much.
But otherwise, free practice, yeah, story of the day was Ferrari coming out with some big improvements. And it looked like we could see both cars vying for those top spots. It wasn't just Charles Leclerc firing ahead. Sainz was very much in the mix as well.
Yes, absolutely. And obviously that went on to qualifying. But just before in practice 3 towards the end, you were right. Mick Schumacher had that unusual slide around Casino and pretty much tore the back end of his car off. And it's quite a high speed impact for Monaco. Obviously, it's a street circuit. So if you do have a bit of a wobble, there's no gravel trap, there's no off, there's just the barrier. And unfortunately, if you roll the dice at Monaco, sometimes it will come back and it will bite you. But also Latifi had a bit of an off as well. They both had an accident in P3, but unlike Schumacher, Latifi managed to start qualifying, whereas Schumacher didn't start qualifying at all, but was allowed to start the race because he met the 107% rule in the practice session. So his times were competitive enough throughout the weekend so far to meet the requirement to start the race, which was great. But that's it for practice. I think qualifying is really, for me, it's the highlight of the weekend. And now
I was
gonna
going to say
start with
exactly the same thing.
So qualifying for me is my personal highlight of the weekend. I know a lot of people think we should take Monaco off the track calendar because you can't overtake, and it's a bit of a scare electric track, and it's won or lost in the pit stops. But actually, racing is such a broad subject, and it happens over a multitude of different tracks. Now, I love the fact that we have to come to Monaco and the focus, every single team has to focus on Saturday. Let's be honest, Sunday is not where the focus is. That's where the race is won. But also, what determines the race result is basically 90% of Saturday's qualifying list. That's how the cars start. And that's what I love about the Saturday. There's so much focus. It almost becomes the Sunday of the weekend. For me personally, it was right. I can't wait for qualifying. These drives are racing millimeter perfect around the track. We had some brilliant shots coming through the swimming pool chicane of how close they're getting to the walls, and how hard they're pushing their cars. And I just love it. Yes, the race wasn't brilliant, but let's not take away the fantastic and the excitement of Saturday. It was just unbelievable. And unfortunately, towards the end of that qualifying session, so we had a mixed result, and obviously we might touch on the results in a second of qualifying because it was quite important. But I think it was 1 minute to go. Most of the cars on the in the top 10 were setting competitive lap times, probably personal bests and sometimes session bests, going purple. And then Charles, who was already P1 in the standings, binned it where so many drivers have binned it before, and caused the only red flag of the week. Oh no, not the only red flag of the weekend, but the red flag of qualifying, and obviously ended it right there and then. And by doing so, it was a bit odd. It was like, oh no, Leclerc's binned it. It's a red flag. He's got pole. It was like, oh yeah, brilliant. This is really strange. But yeah, your thoughts on qualifying and the incident in itself?
I did enjoy qualifying. I agree that it is the highlight of the weekend. I think I still stand by what I said in our preview of the calendar for this year that we recorded before the season started, where I think I said if Monaco were to come off the calendar, I don't think I would really miss it. I appreciated it for what it is, and I kind of recognise the history, and it has its place on the calendar, like you say, as that do all the work on the Saturday, and then on Sunday it's just a matter of staying focused for that amount of time and not putting it in the wall. And we do get those fantastic shots of the cars. It looks like they're just kissing the barriers going through. There's no denying, though, that the race, it just really, really suffers, and it's a very, very long time to be sat there. My notes page is almost completely blank compared to the ordinary race weekend. So I stand by saying that I don't think I would miss it if it went off, but certainly enjoyed qualifying. Just talking about Leclerc's crash then, which is obviously the big story from Q3. That's effectively secured his pole position, like you said. Now, Toto Wolff said afterwards that a rule change akin to the red flag rules in IndyCar would be an intelligent choice, he said, which basically, I think if you cause a red flag in qualifying in IndyCar, you get your 2 fastest lap times removed. So, and he said that would be an intelligent choice. What do you think about that?
I think it's obviously very topical this weekend because there's a lot of people on social media who said it was done on purpose to secure pole. And I don't believe that for 1 second at all. I believe
that's completely absurd.
This is Monaco. It's not like Charles outbroke himself and went into a slip road, not causing any damage to his car, causing a yellow flag and then ruining everyone's lap time like Nico Rosberg did a couple of years ago. This one, I believe, was a complete accident, and that's all I've got to say on that. But with regards to if you cause a red flag getting your fastest 2 lap times deleted, what happens if you cause a red flag by no fault of your own? What if it was a mechanical failure? What if your engine blew up like we saw in F2 this weekend? Or you get a puncture, which is due to a bit of debris on the track where you don't have any control about where your car's going. And we're in Monaco, so there's not really any escape roads. Is that fair?
I can only assume that the stipulation of the rule would be like if you caused it, if you crash and caused it, basically. Okay. So I assume that would be the factor that would determine whether or not you were, the cause of it. If it were an accident, like you say, then your car breaks down or something and you're stuck in the middle of the
Yeah.
track, then that would be different. But I thought it was
It's very
interesting that
interesting.
Verstappen was asked about it, wasn't he? Verstappen said that he didn't think that he should take a penalty and that he recognised that it was a mistake. Obviously, it wasn't deliberate. Like, you wouldn't put your car in the wall to take pole because as we
No, of
saw,
course.
it ruined his chance of even starting the race. So that would be, you just wouldn't do that. But also Verstappen, it's telling that he doesn't want to be on pole because of penalties. He's a racer. He wants to get there because he
Yeah.
was faster than people. And I think that alone should be enough to cement that this is a place where lots of people, as you say, have made that mistake. So and Leclerc paid for it. He paid the ultimate price.
Absolutely. And I think that's really good of Max to come out and say what he did. But let's not forget that Max is also, I think he's crashed in that position twice over the last couple of years. And when he was in a Toro Rosso at the time, he had a hefty impact going into turn one. So he's not too shy of the barriers in Monaco. So at least he's a bit planted when it comes to accidents. He's not like he's saying that he's invincible and he's perfect around this track. He's admitting that, people make mistakes and people are trying to push to the absolute limit. And I can see why Charles wanted to, because for him, the car was extremely competitive this weekend. And if he could secure pole position, what is at his home Grand Prix, where he's had terrible luck before at Monaco, and unfortunately that continued through this weekend, that would have been great for Ferrari. And let's not take, Ferrari had a fantastic weekend anyway, but it could have been twice as good. It could have been incredible. But yeah, interesting. Very interesting.
Couple more stories from qualifying then. Ricciardo, mentioned him earlier, out in Q2. Some frustration possibly seeping in. We know that, of course, he won here in 2018. We know that he's done so well here before. So that was a little bit of a surprise. Shout out to Sainz as well, of course, whose time was only 0.3 behind his posted time, Leclerc's posted time, that is, and was going even faster before the red flag came out. So like I said earlier, it wasn't just Leclerc miles away. Sainz was very much in the running as well, it looked like. There's now some drivers that have transferred teams going into this season, like Ricciardo, who are struggling with their new machinery, but Sainz looks very much up to speed now. It'll be very exciting to see what he can achieve, and his result in the race speaks to that confidence in red that he has now. Also, Gasly starting ahead of Perez. Even the Mercedes Twitter admin jibed that Gasly was the second Red Bull in P5, which is somewhat amusing. I also want to give a shout out to first Q3 for Alfa Romeo, courtesy of Giovinazzi, with a very respectable lap indeed. I thought that in general, Giovinazzi had a very good weekend. Ended up coming out with a point, I believe. I think he got
he did first points of the season.
He got them off the mark, didn't he? So yeah. So there's a few more interesting stories in qualifying, but obviously the big one was the will he won't he start the race palaver that carried on before the lights out had even happened.
Yeah, it's definitely a shame for Charles, because he put in such a stellar performance on the Saturday, and it was all very unknown going into Sunday whether he would start or not. I think the Ferrari social media team were letting us know that everything looked okay, and the provisional checks they did before an official fire up looked absolutely fine. And then we've all heard it probably by now. It's on the F1 YouTube channel. Charles coming out the tunnel and noticing that his gearbox is having issues, and it's the sorrow of a no the gearbox, and at that point you just know, it's a hand in heart situation. He's not starting this race. But qualifying for me, Lando Norris did fantastic. For the whole weekend, he's really, really doing that McLaren an absolute worldie of a drive. I don't know if he's out driving it, because it's very hard to compare him against his teammate at the moment, or whether he's just stepped up to the mark and is just laying down the gauntlet. It's really hard to say, but he's doing such a fantastic job. Who did surprise me, and I've said this throughout all of last year's podcast, if you've listened to us before, I'd always say George Russell for points, and I was secretly hoping this weekend that George Russell might have a little bit of a chance for his first points in a Williams. But he only qualified 15th, I believe. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think he finished 14th. So it was not a good day for Williams. Bearing in mind, on faster tracks, he's been in Q2 and like finished just outside the points in P11 or P12. Yeah, kind of expected a little bit more. But like you said, it's wherever you qualify is probably where you're going to finish off in the race. And we saw that for so many drivers. For example, the 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, who didn't lose or didn't make any places up this whole race. So that just goes to show how hard it is to overtake in this type of track. But that's all I've got to say in qualifying. Apart from it was really exciting. And yeah, would I miss the race? I probably wouldn't, to be honest. But I'm glad that it was back because we missed it last year.
There's certainly something fun about seeing a few fans in the stands here as well. It was relatively quiet. It wasn't quite the sort of big party boat situation that you normally get. The spectacle is certainly something, at least. Let's move on to next talking point then. I was going to bring up, we've kind of touched on it a bit before, but I was just going to talk a little bit more about Ricciardo and Norris in comparison. Now, Ricciardo obviously qualified P12 and finished the race there as well, I believe. Just didn't really make up any places. There wasn't much to be found strategy-wise. And I think that the team felt that he had done very well on the hards. But he also had discussed with... he had a little interview beforehand where he talked about the car itself and that the McLaren has a very, very specific window in which it works. And Lando, with his experience at the team and with the development of the car, knows where that window is. And this can be expanded on a little bit by looking at the way that Ricciardo drove the Renault when he was there and the way that he drives the McLaren now compared to Norris. So it seems that Ricciardo, we all know that he's last of the late breakers. He has this style where he continues to brake fairly significantly going through a corner whilst putting lock on the steering wheel, which has obviously worked in previous cars, especially in that Red Bull. It seemed to be particularly favourable, especially, I don't know if it's exactly the case now. I suppose it must be something to do with their design, but the Red Bull has always been quite pointy, and so he was able to get that rotation whilst braking. Whereas most drivers trail brake, where they brake hard and then they release the brake going through the corner, whereas Ricciardo seems to hold it down that little bit longer. It appears that just doesn't really work in this McLaren. It seems to cause a lot of understeer for him. And you can see when you compare the way that Ricciardo was braking in the Renault last year compared to where Norris is braking. Norris is braking a lot earlier and basically carrying more speed through the corners, whereas Ricciardo wants to brake a lot later and then try and brake more through the corners and then get on the power in a slightly different manner. Clearly, he's struggling with that. Clearly, he just hasn't found the way to make that work, and he needs to adapt to the car, which is ultimately what great drivers do. They don't say, well, this is my driving style, deal with it. They need to be able to adapt to the needs of the car, and Ricciardo is still doing that. I'm not sort of, all hope is lost. Ricciardo's, he's never going to get back there. I don't feel that way at all. I think that it must be very frustrating for him, but I still have hope. I'm a little disappointed by the results, but I'm sure he is, and I'm sure that they're working hard to keep getting him familiar with that car. So fingers crossed that things will get improved. How do you feel about the Ricciardo situation? Are you feeling optimistic as well, or?
It's a strange one because in one hand, I look at McLaren as a team and Lando Norris is doing incredibly well. And I rate Daniel Ricciardo as a very, very successful, a very highly rated driver. So when I put those two together, I imagine Daniel being absolutely brilliant in the McLaren. I watched that interview as well, and it was really good to listen to him talk about the difficulties he's facing. Obviously, we've had 5 races now. Carlos Sainz is doing quite well in the Ferrari. Sergio Perez is picking up pace in the Red Bull, especially on Sundays. And Ricciardo is just kind of stuck in this qualifying behind. Actually, to be fair, he's out-qualified Lando a couple of times, but it's just gone backwards in the race because of that driving style. Is all hope lost? Absolutely not. We can see that the car's there, and like you said, all great drivers just need to change their driving style ever so slightly to maximise the potential of that car. And I think it's just going to take longer than anyone expected. I think we all saw Daniel go into the McLaren and thought, this is going to be incredible. This is going to be a top-tier driver. It's going to be podiums every other weekend.
On paper, it's an absolutely unbelievable
Yes,
combination
it
of
is.
drivers.
And I think, especially over the winter break, there was a lot of hype. And of course, there would
Yeah.
have been. It's Daniel Ricciardo going into McLaren next to Lando Norris, this up, I don't want to say this up and coming team, but they've definitely improved so much over the last 5 or 6 years. This could be absolutely magical. And it will be magical, but it might just be after the mid-season break. It might be after the summer break when he's had more time to get used to the car and just slightly change his driving style. I'm a little bit not disappointed. I'm just sad that it hasn't been straight away because I wanted it to be incredible to begin with. And look what Norris has achieved in that car and where he's sat in the championship standings at the moment. Now, if we had Daniel a couple of places behind him or matching that, that is going to be an absolute power couple right there in that McLaren. We've just got to give it time. All hope is not lost. I'm just a little bit gutted that it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, it seems to be quite a strange car to drive. So fingers crossed that they're both Ricciardo and Lando can. Well, Lando seems to have got it figured out, but Ricciardo needs to just get a little bit more comfortable with the weirdness, the quirks of the car, and like you say, the potential is absolutely huge. But then again, I'm sure that's what Red Bull fans are thinking about Perez and Verstappen, and I'm sure that's what Aston Martin fans are thinking about Stroll and Vettel. So it's very mixed up, isn't it? There's a lot of it's like Alonso, for example. He is also struggling. I mean, he's being decidedly outperformed by Ocon. Esteban has been pretty consistent, and Fernando Alonso, who again has a history of doing very well here, has won in Monaco, just didn't really connect it together. So it's where the talking point was started off as Ricciardo, but there is a theme of not only experienced drivers not necessarily finding immediate form, especially if they've switched teams, but also that everyone who has switched teams, whether experienced or otherwise, there's a particular character to each of these cars that takes some time to get used to.
Isn't it exciting though that we've had these great drivers. We've got Sebastian Vettel, Fernando Alonso, Daniel Ricciardo, and seemingly, and it sounds terrible, and I don't mean to put any of these drivers down, they're all struggling. These 10-year plus drivers who we rate so highly with multiple championships between them, apart from Daniel. That just reminds me of that press conference when he's like, "Yep, we have eight championships between us," and I think Lewis had 7 and someone else had 1. And it was, anyway, if you haven't seen it, it's brilliant. But we've got these highly rated drivers really struggling, and these young guns who've been in the same team now for 2 or 3 years, laying down the gauntlet. I've used that expression too many times today, but just really showing how it's done. And it creates such a weird but exciting dynamic in the Formula One paddock that we've got Max Verstappen outperforming, the majority of the grid. We've got Lewis Hamilton who's doing fantastic, but is that because he's been in the same car for 7 years? Max has been in that same car for 5 years now. Lando Norris, he's just signed a new 3-year contract, so he's done 3 years with McLaren, and he's got used to that car. But we've got Sebastian Vettel, different car, struggling. Sergio Perez. Everyone thought he was going to jump into that Red Bull seat and be an absolute god, but he's struggling. Carlos Sainz, up into this race, was trailing Charles Leclerc, but not by much, mind you. Carlos has probably adapted the best out of everyone. And like you said, Fernando Alonso, who everyone thought would come into this season and wipe the floor of Ocon's just taken him to the cleaners so far.
I didn't think that.
You didn't, and it does. I will eat my words because I remember in the preview or the predictions you said that Fernando Alonso, he is a good driver, but you also rate Esteban Ocon very highly, and I argued with you how I felt about Ocon, but credit where credit's due, he's doing fantastic.
I did also make a bold prediction that Alonso would win a race just because it's so Alonso-like to be able to just drag a car somehow onto the top of the podium in unlikely circumstances, But I had faith. I had faith in Ocon. I think that he's shown good spirit, and I'm not surprised at all to hear talk already of Alpine looking to keep him on because I think he's turning out to be a real asset for that team. Do you want to go to your next talking point then?
I want to talk to you, and it's funny how you mentioned good spirit because someone who made my weekend, as well as Lando Norris and this amazing podium, was Sebastian Vettel. And the Aston Martin outfit as a whole. So up until this race, they've been nowhere. Completely overhyped in preseason, in the preseason, in the winter testing. They were, it was going to be this massive new team coming in, wiping the floor of everyone, potentially challenging for P3, and they've just been absolutely nowhere. But this weekend, obviously very track dependent, and we don't know how that car performs elsewhere, whether it was upgrades or whether it was just because it was Monaco and it's not too power dependent. Probably the case. Sebastian Vettel came alive again, and I've just watched before I did the podcast was the radio responses to everyone when they crossed the line, and we had the old crazy frog from Sebastian Vettel again. It was just nice hearing him happy, talk, saying good things about the car, congratulating the team on a brilliant overcut, which I'm sure we'll get onto later on in the podcast. But yeah, what a day for Aston Martin, picking up a handful of points with Seb in P5 and Lance, I think, in P8. Yeah, so decent amount of points in the bag, and the first time they scored points this year so far. My question for you is, Alex, is this the start of potentially a better Aston Martin, and they're going to collect maybe not as many points going forward, maybe not finishing as high as P5, but might be finishing P7 or P8, picking up a handful of points here and there? Or do you think this was very much track dependent, and because it wasn't necessarily a power circuit, next week when we go to Baku, they might struggle?
Well, what Aston Martin got right that other teams, or some other teams got wrong, was they were very quick on their strategy. They reacted well at the right time. That obviously propelled Vettel forward. But I don't want to take away from Vettel's weekend and give too much, or give all the credit to the team at least, because at one point he was the second fastest on track. He was putting some real times in. He looked very comfortable. He obviously got past Gasly. You said we were going to talk about it later, but we're talking about Aston Martin, so we might as well mention it now. Which is that lap 32 after the pit stops, Vettel was sort of coming out of the pits towards Gasly, where it's going to happen. Someone's going to overtake somebody on track. To be fair, it had happened a few times. I've seen a few people saying only one on-track overtake, but there's that, and Schumacher got past Mazepin, and Alonso got past a couple of people. Yeah. So there were a few overtakes. But the trouble is we didn't get to see them because the director decided to cut to, as has now already been memed 1 million times. Everywhere. So I barely need to really explain it, but on the odd chance that you don't know, they cut to a shot of Stroll bouncing over the curbs at I can't remember exactly where it was on track, but it was a very, very strange decision. I think they did it again later on.
Yes, they did it during the replay.
Well, I'm going to talk more a little bit about this later on, so I won't get too hard into the broadcast mistakes, but that was part of it. But main point, Vettel makes up another place there, fought with Gasly for P5. He just looked a lot more comfortable. Now, in answer to your question, will we see them do better over the course of the season? Very hard to tell, but I think at the very least this will be a big confidence boost for them and show that if they can keep consistency with things like their strategy and their pit stops, sometimes you don't need to have the ultimate car when you can make the right decision at the right time strategy-wise. So certainly, I think that it would be nice to see Aston Martin really challenging. It has been very underwhelming so far. And it's such a good-looking car. I would like to see it more often fighting for a decent position. I do also want to see Sebastian Vettel get a little bit more success again and to prove the naysayers wrong. It's so strange that everyone, well, not everyone, but so many people, certainly the vocal majority of people are willing him on, and come on, Sebastian Vettel, we want to see him smile again. We want to see the finger, which did come back. We did see the finger at the end. I remember when Vettel was winning all the time and everyone hated him.
I know.
Everyone was hating on Sebastian Vettel and that stupid finger. He's so arrogant and he doesn't play the team game. And now because he's suffering, everyone wants him to do well again. It's funny.
What I love about Seb?
It is.
I love Inspector Seb. At the end of every single race, he'll have a little nose at the race-winning car. And normally it's the old Mercedes. He's either putting his foot on the tyre and rocking it back and forth, or his head is right in that cockpit looking at all the buttons and switches. But today, or not today, but yesterday, it was the old Red Bull. He was having a look, and I was just wondering what was going through his mind. Because you absolutely would, because, at one point, he's had all the success with the Red Bull. So I was wondering what was going through his head, but nevertheless, fantastic weekend for Aston Martin, especially Sebastian Vettel. And it was just, I'm smiling when I'm talking about it. It was just good to see that guy happy. Everyone thought he was down and out when he left Ferrari. It was a little bit sad when he did under the circumstances. Went into this new team. Team's been a bit underwhelming this year, but to have a little bit of success, just it might have sparked off something. You never know. Q 2 weeks time when we talk about Baku and Aston Martin being at the back of the grid.
Baku of the grid, perhaps.
Baku of the grid.
Aston Martin also receiving the award for least excited sounding race engineers. They seem to have hired some very, very sort of perhaps just very stoic race engineers. And they score their double points. And yes, good drive.
Yeah,
well
safe
done.
fuel.
Yeah, slow button on. Like, come on, let's have a bit of hype, a little bit of hype.
Where's
Don't
the
get carried
passion?
away, but a little bit of, I don't know. Poor Lance Stroll with Brad. The saga continues.
Oh, blimey.
But yeah, hopefully a bit more excitement from Aston Martin going forward, and I do hope that we see them fighting for a few more points because, hey, the title race is already nice and close, and why not make it even closer?
Absolutely. Now we spoke about ever so slightly the TV coverage, and I can see you're edging to talk about it right now. Is this something you want to touch on, given that we've talked about the replay occasionally?
Well, it's a combination of two things. It's a combination of the mistakes in the coverage, but also some rather desperate and unnecessary measures to try and spice up the race rather than just kind of letting it be what it was. We've mentioned the sort of awkward cutaway at a key moment where we're actually going to see an overtake, but also the TV graphics were an absolute mess. They were trying to like throw things on the screen to make it look exciting. We got our pointless AWS tire performance graphic. We also got the the one where they have it tells you the difficulty of the overtake.
Oh yes, this got me because
pretty sure that in Imola they said it was like maximum difficulty, and yet in Monaco it was like not quite at the top. And like, hang on a minute.
Yeah, I thought that.
How are they? Where are they going to get past? Like, have a little think about this. Where's this coming from? And then we had a mix-up where they were trying to show stats for the two drivers, and they mixed up Gasly and Hamilton. Gasly apparently has 7 world titles and 3 wins so far. Did you know that?
Oh, what a guy.
Well, it said it on the stats, so it can't,
must be true.
Right? We had wrong corner numbers being shown. And also, lastly, the big thing as well about wanting to spice things up instead of just kind of, letting the race be what it is. There was a lot of talk about, well, hopefully there'll be a safety car near the end of the race. Hopefully there'll be a safety car to bunch this up. We could see a yellow flag. The likelihood is very high. There's something a little bit perverse about people talking about safety cars as if nonchalantly wanting a crash.
Yeah.
Like, surely we don't want people to crash. We want people to race. I know that perhaps people just wanted something exciting to happen, but there's something a little odd about willing a crash to happen. I'm not sure how I feel about that, especially when it's coming. It's one thing for fans and people watching it to say that, but when it's coming from the broadcasters and people so close to the track, so close to the action, I don't know. There's something not right about that.
Yeah, it is odd winning a crash or winning a yellow flag, especially around Monaco where it's very unforgiving. Like some of those corners you're going around at 150 miles an hour. If you're
have
crashing,
a really nasty accident.
Yeah, and I'm talking about the swimming pool section. It's quite flowing, that long left. It's a left-hander after the chicane coming out of the tunnel. And if you crash there, you're going to ride that barrier for a good couple of 100 meters before you hit the seafront, which is, it's not great. But yeah, don't get me wrong. The commentary team, I think, did an all right job given they had a 2-hour race to talk about. They definitely did. And they didn't oversell it too much. But yeah, it was a bit odd them towards the end of the race. Or we could do with a yellow flag here. Okay, so you're asking someone to crash. I'm not sure that's in the spirit of racing, but okay. I think they were just hoping for a strategy mix-up or something to potentially give them something to talk about for the last 10 laps. But yeah, just one of those things.
We also had Serena Williams, wasn't it, at the end? Now, a lot of people are blaming David Coulthard for this because he obviously invited her on, but I have a feeling he was probably asked to do that because she was like guest of honor or whatever. And he probably just needed to think of something to ask her. But we had this rather bizarre situation where, like, what advice would you give Max Verstappen? I hope Max Verstappen's going to show up when Serena wins her next trophy. And Max, give some advice on how Serena Williams can get better at tennis. It was this really bizarre situation.
Yes, it
Why are
was.
we doing this? Like, this is supposed to be Max Verstappen's moment, and you've just
Yeah.
created this really awkward encounter when nobody really wants to be doing it. We're not learning anything. It's not entertaining other than for perhaps cringe factor. Why are we doing this?
It was cringy, and I got over the fact that, well, we saw her around the paddock throughout the whole weekend, like we did many celebrities. And then I saw her going. Oh, it was mentioned that she was going to wave the checkered flag, and I thought, oh, for the love of whatever, please wave it on the correct lap. We've already seen it's been done wrong once. Let's not have a repeat. So, she waved on the correct lap, and I thought, you know what, if that's fair enough. If a celebrity wants to come on, especially, she's not really a celebrity, she's an athlete. She's an athlete, so if she wants to come on and wave the checkered flag, then I've got no problem with that whatsoever. But Max Verstappen has just taken the lead of the Drivers' World Championship. Red Bull have just taken the lead of the Constructors' Championship. Max's first win at Monaco. But let's just tune in to Serena Williams and see what she has to say about, Max's performance and these racing drivers. It was very odd indeed. And I've already seen some memes. Yeah, and I've already seen some memes online with Max standing on the edge of a tennis court in his racing kit, just ready with a mic to interview Serena about some random stuff. It was odd. It kind of just took away the moment for me, just ever so slightly.
And we should emphasize that I don't think it's DC's fault. I have a feeling he was probably told to do it, and it's not Serena Williams' fault as well. She was probably just invited as a sort of guest of honor, come and wave the flag, have a nice day out in between training or whatever. So, but just a weird situation, and again, just trying to add something to the race rather than just letting it be what it was. It was already a momentous occasion at the end of the race like that. So, a little bit, some rather unusual decisions and desperation creeping in, especially with the graphics, like I mentioned before. Just getting it horribly wrong. I hope some lessons are learnt from a slightly scrappy broadcast at what is supposed to be the most prestigious race on the calendar.
Yeah, it was. The TV coverage was sloppy at best, and sometimes the timing screen was all wrong. Like Bottas would, after his retirement, would jump up to the top of the grid and then jump back down. And I was like, what is going on? This is crazy. And like you said, it's almost a shame because Monaco is this historic race and everyone looks forward to it. It's the rich and famous. It's what, a country turns into a racetrack for the day, and everyone tunes in because it's Monaco. But I find it really strange that the whole world tunes in for what will be the most boring race of the year. Like,
what an advert for Grand Prix racing.
Yeah, I've always found this really strange. Yes, you've got the spectacle of Monaco. You've got all the yachts. I mean, Lance Stroll's father has an incredible yacht. That was massive. It was like a building in the I was gonna say boatyard then, but in the what's the word I'm looking for?
The marina.
That's the one. It's like a whole building in the marina. It put the there was no Red Bull display this year because they obviously didn't want loads of people gathering in one place. But I reckon it would have put it to shame. But besides that, you've got this spectacle, which is Monaco. It looks fantastic. It's glamorous. It's full of the rich and famous. The cars look great going around the circuit. But it's the worst track of the year for overtaking at the moment. I can't comment what it's going to be like in a couple of years' time with the new regs. But why promote it so heavily? Like, we should be promoting Monza, where the cars reach 225 miles an hour down the back straight. It's something incredible, or, I don't know. But yeah, I just found it so strange that this is so heavily advertised as one of the best F1 races or the best F1 tracks. And it's really not by any stretch of the imagination. It may have been in the past, don't get me wrong, but it's not now.
Yeah, I guess they just want to try and sell it to emphasize the skill involved of just going around the track for 78 laps, which is definitely there, but it's quite hard to... It can get a bit awkward if you try and over-promote it when the end result is not exactly much drama for nearly 2 hours. From the viewer's point of view, especially if you're not a mega fan and you just watch Formula One to just see some fast cars every now and again, it's not a great advert for Formula One, really. But I don't think they're going to stop anytime soon. I can't imagine that they're going to quit because, hey, it's in a lot of their backyard. Most of them probably live down the road. Just pop down the road, go and do a race.
I think Charles at one point in FP1 was waving to his friends on a balcony who lived there whilst he was driving past in Sector 1. I thought that's got to be quite nice. That's how the other half live, isn't it?
Nico Rosberg's, because he lives in Monaco, right?
He does, yes.
Nico Rosberg's mic kept sort of cutting in and out, and I was wondering if maybe like somebody there was playing a joke on him on something. Maybe it's somebody messing about. Half of the grid probably have properties in Monaco, so...
I did find it, talking about Nico Rosberg really quickly, I found it really strange after qualifying how Nico and the Sky Sports team were talking about how some people are saying that Leclerc may have done it on purpose to secure pole position, and Nico's face, just the awkwardness in his face whilst the other two were talking about it really made me laugh, because obviously, well, we've all, it's a couple of years ago now, and he's been picked up on it a few times throughout throughout the years. But today, on Saturday when Leclerc put it in the wall, I just found it very funny that Nico was giving his expert opinion on whether it was on purpose or not, given what happened in the couple of years ago.
Right, I think it's your turn then. Your turn for the next talking point.
Right. So I think let's talk about Mercedes, shall we? Let's talk about Mercedes and how. What's the best way to describe this? How they go from this pristine, perfect team with the ultimate strategy and brilliant race performance to what can only be described as just rookies. Well, we mentioned it before we started the show, didn't we? How just suboptimal they were, and how it's just from one extreme to the other with Mercedes. And yeah, a week to forget for the Mercedes team. I think it's easier to talk about Bottas first, because there's not many factors which come into play when it comes to Bottas this week. I hope you agree with me, but one of the most unluckiest drivers on the grid this weekend, because through no fault of his own, he ended up out of the race. I think he qualified in P3, which is probably better than what Mercedes could have hoped for. But bearing in mind that qualifying session was cut short, so he may have been bumped down the grid a couple more spaces given the pace of the Ferrari and the Red Bull. So I think P3 was pretty good for Bottas. Obviously, Leclerc didn't start the race, so comfortably in P2. And given how the race was going, probably would have been on the podium. And it would have been a pretty good points haul for the Finn. And would have not put him back in championship contention, but would have kept him in P3 quite nicely, and a little bit of a buffer between him and Lando Norris. But came into the pits and instantly they had this perfect top-down view. It's the classic Netflix shot. Rolled in, 3 tyres came off, 3 tyres went on, and that front right, after 2 or 3 spins of that gun, I thought, it's not coming off. Like, you haven't just missed it. You haven't just missed the thread here. Something's gone wrong. And then I saw one guy literally trying to push the tyre off, and it just didn't move at all. And well, we all know what happened. And I think 24 hours later, that tyre is still on that car. I think Mercedes put on Twitter earlier that, that tyre, because they threaded the wheel nut or they machined the nut, and they can't get that tyre off. It's the thing which is designed to undo and let that tyre off has no grip, has no thread on it anymore. And that tyre's still on that car. But how unlucky for Bottas, which could have been a pretty plain sailing weekend for him. Not necessarily plain sailing, like Monaco is very hard and his concentration levels would have had to be at 100%. But what could have been an easy P2 or P3, and to finish ahead of Hamilton as well, would have been good for the teammate battle. Absolute disaster. And I'm not sure whether, can you blame the Mercedes pit crew for that, or is it just completely unlucky? What's your thoughts on just Bottas at the moment?
Well, certainly for Bottas, yeah, he doesn't seem to be able to catch a break. Sometimes I feel frustrated just because his performance is occasionally just a bit underwhelming or lackluster, and that puts him in a position where some greater problem happens, like what we saw in Imola, where that accident really shouldn't have been possible because Bottas shouldn't have been in that position in the first place. But then you have a weekend where in Monaco, he's just not done anything wrong. He's doing pretty much exactly what is asked from him. I think they were trying to get a little bit more pace out of him to at least try and put Verstappen under pressure. It didn't really happen. They were telling him to push, and I think he got the fastest lap at one point, but he never really got with any there was never a point where he's getting close to Max and maybe Max is under a bit of pressure. That just never really happened. But he didn't do anything wrong. He was holding the position. Like you say, it should have been an easy podium for him. And I think the team, I've never seen anything like that happen before. I've never seen a driver retire from a race because they couldn't get a wheel off. That is absolutely bizarre. And Mercedes just don't seem to be able to make small mistakes and be slightly mediocre. They are either brutal to the rest of the field and just whack everyone, or they are hilarious and it's a clown show and they just get everything horribly wrong. Their pit stops have always been a little bit subpar. They've just sort of focused on everything else because they don't need to make up the time in the stops. Whereas Red Bull have gone for maximum pit stop performance, and that, that really worked for them this race. That's for sure. Perez certainly took advantage of that, and they did very well with their strategy. How that can happen with a piece of equipment, I don't know. I don't think anyone's going to individually is necessarily going to be raked over the coals. I don't know if it really is the fault of the wheel gun operator. It's hard to say, but big question as to how something like that can even happen to the wheel nut. I don't even know how that's possible. Bottas was obviously visibly very angry, and I think he threw his gloves across the garage or whatever. He was incredibly calm, I thought, considering the situation. And you're there, and your entire race has just been stolen away from you. It's not like Leclerc, who at the very least you could say it was his fault that he put it in the wall on the Saturday. Bottas has done absolutely nothing wrong. I thought he showed an incredible amount of composure, all things considered. Lewis Hamilton, on the other hand, he had a very underwhelming Saturday. I feel like you can never rule out Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes to take pole. And whilst Ferrari and Red Bull had the pace to fight at the front, I think I was surprised that Lewis Hamilton wasn't fighting further ahead in qualifying. He eventually put in a 1:11 dead, which was, again, it's hard to tell because the qualifying was cut short, but at the time of the red flag was 7/10 behind Charles Leclerc, which is not an insignificant gap when you consider how good the Mercedes has been everywhere, how consistent it has been. At the end of the race, Hamilton was understandably kind of annoyed, I think, because when you win and you win and you win and you win and you just expect to constantly be at the top, and then suddenly, kind of through no fault of your own, and at a track where you just can't overtake, you end up stuck behind Gasly. I think he was understandably a bit annoyed with the team. And it was just a very, very strange reaction all around when he was in the press pen. Hamilton was clearly, visibly very irritated and shocked that even such a thing could happen. I think Hamilton could have been on the podium. I think it was entirely possible that if they played their strategy like Aston Martin had, he could have jumped a few people and maybe even ended up on the podium. But it just wasn't to be, and as we said, it's either brilliance or clown show for Mercedes.
I think the weekend became quite apparent. I wasn't too worried in P1 or P2 when Mercedes weren't really lighting up the timesheets because it's P1 and P2 and they've got no need to. They're just there for race pace. They're doing their own program, and it's usually P3 and qualifying where they really show their pace. P3 came along. Yeah, I mean, they were in the top 5 or 6, so it was like, okay, they're there or thereabouts, but Ferrari and Red Bull are very strong. But as qualifying went on, we just didn't see that urgency. We didn't see that Mercedes on the rails like we usually do. It was just slower than the Red Bull and the Ferrari, which was unusual to see. And like you say, 7/10 off the pace. Obviously, we can't confirm what the ultimate pace would have been at the end of that lap, but as much as Lewis may have been improving, so was Max. And so was Charles, or, so was Carlos Sainz, for example. So it's interesting to see that maybe that Mercedes has found a little bit of a weakness, and it is street circuits. And if it's street circuits where they struggle to follow people, then that's not a bad weakness to have because there's not many street circuits on the calendar. So, maybe they're just suboptimal today, and, next week at Baku, where you've got a little bit more of a wider street circuit, so they can carry more speed, they'll be a little bit better. But as for the pit stop strategy, it's not often that Mercedes are the first ones to box, or it's not often they're forced to box because normally they're out front controlling the pace. Lewis is quite good managing his tyres despite the radio contact to Bono and how the tyres are dead. He always seems to find a couple more laps. It always seems to manage it to the point where his strategy is on point. But this week, Mercedes were faced with the unusual situation whereby they had a driver in the middle of the field, right in the middle of the field in a really densely populated track, and they had to try something different. And I'm not quite sure whether Mercedes have spent so many years now making strategy calls from P1 and P2 or P1 and P3 fighting for the lead and not having to worry about traffic because they've already built up a 20-second lead, that when it comes to getting that strategy right in the middle of in the middle of the pack where they're going to rejoin in the middle of the pack, maybe that's something they've just not had much, they've not had to do it very often, and maybe that's their downfall because it just didn't work. And Lewis said that he thought he drove a really good outlap and he thought he had a really strong couple of laps after, but clearly the overcut worked so much better. I mean, look at Perez, who just jumped him by an absolute country mile. Sebastian Vettel and Gasly both did exactly the same thing, and he was noticeably upset over the radio. I just want to touch on the radio transcript for just a moment because I've seen a lot of stuff on social media about how Hamilton reacts when he's under pressure and how he has outbursts on the radio. For everyone who's listening, and I hope you let other people know this, every single driver is moaning down that radio every single lap of the race. They're moaning about the car in front of them. They're moaning about their own car. They're moaning about the car behind him. They're moaning about blue flags. They're moaning about the pace. They're moaning about the pit stop. For some unknown reason, and it bothers me to such a high degree, that whoever runs, the broadcasting, or whoever clips all these radios, it's just Lewis. And they paint Lewis in such an arrogant way because he's moaning about tyre strategies, moaning about temperatures or traffic, and he can't overtake. Makes him sound like he's really struggling. But in fact, when you dive through the depths of every single team's radio transcript, you've got F1 TV, you can listen to any team radio you want. Every driver is doing it, but they just paint one driver in such an arrogant way. And then it's so easy to clip these radio messages as well. It's so easy to take a 30-second clip where he's talking about the race strategy, take 5 seconds of that where he's just saying this isn't good enough, and all of a sudden you've taken that one clip out of context and making that driver look horrendous. And I'm not saying that Hamilton doesn't have any, he was clearly distraught at the end of the race and probably said some things on reflection that he maybe shouldn't have done and wouldn't have been in the best interests of Mercedes, but it does annoy me how he's painted in that picture throughout the race.
So you're saying he's being painted by the broadcasters, or?
Well, how many other drivers do you hear on the radio throughout the race?
Well, we heard from quite a few drivers, I thought.
I didn't think we did. I thought it was primarily Hamilton. Like, I just honestly do, and it's throughout every single race as well.
We heard from Sainz a few times.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's fair enough, but
what I do agree with you with though is I think I see what you're saying though, which is that I have seen some commentary on Hamilton's reaction, which is that he's like whinging about it following a bad result, and that when things go well, it's thanking the team, and when things go badly, it's you guys have messed up. There's a we win and lose together when they do well, and then that sentiment doesn't seem to carry through when they actually do badly. But I mean, it's just part of the expectation of the drivers to be completely inhuman and not show any weaknesses or vulnerabilities or emotions. It's a human being at the end of the day. Who'd have thought professional athletes could be so competitive?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you say, so many drivers also are complaining about things all the time on the radio. I mean, yeah, we definitely heard from plenty of other drivers, but lots of them were also complaining about things. Sainz was complaining about people getting in the way, and people. It's like accusations of Mazepin being the only person ignoring blue flags, for example. There are lots of people complaining about drivers in front of them ignoring blue flags, or they should get out the way during free practice. But because some people might have a particular desire to paint someone in a worse light if they think that they can. In the case of someone like Hamilton, I guess there's a certain amount of schadenfreude for some people to see him doing badly for a change when he normally does so well. But yeah, I don't really know what else to say about Hamilton's reaction. He's understandably irritated. And I don't expect him to have this constant zen-like response to everything. He's a human being. He has every reason to be annoyed because he didn't really do much wrong. He also complained on the radio that he had saved his tyres in order to go long, and then his team had stopped him early. So
Yeah.
if he's done one thing and his team have kind of got him to do something else, he's going to be annoyed by that, when normally he might expect a certain harmony. Maybe they agreed something before the race and that was changed last minute. We don't have the full picture. But the long and short of it for me is that I don't expect Hamilton to constantly have this. He must have one specific reaction. He's got to be lovely over the radio all the time. When your blood is up, you say and do things that maybe you wouldn't say. And I think what happens on and is said on track stays on track.
Yeah. I would going forward, I'd quite like to hear other drivers throughout the race on the radio as well, just to even it out just a little bit. But overall, Mercedes, definitely a week to forget. 2 weeks' time, we're in Baku.
Certainly 2 laps to forget. It was lap 31 and 32. It just all went wrong there.
Yeah. And they do a midweek, or on the Wednesday after the race, don't they? They do a bit of a roundup, and they do like a technical dive into what went wrong. And I'll be looking forward to that this weekend. Like, I'll be looking forward to the McLaren unbox, because each of those teams will be equally as spicy, and I'll be interested to see what they thought of their retrospective races. But that's it. That's all I have to say on Mercedes. Usually we talk about how great and wonderful they are, and today it was not the case. So on to your next talking point.
The only other thing that I wanted to bring up really was just that just to mention Leclerc's curse, really, which sadly continues. Not only did Leclerc not start the race, but he's yet to even see the checkered flag at all at his home Grand Prix. He's done 3 races here, Sauber and Ferrari. He's never seen the checkered flag at his home Grand Prix. The curse continues. Now, Ferrari, they gambled on the gearbox because they didn't think that there was anything wrong with it. And it later emerged, well, he thought it was the gearbox when he was coming out, when you mentioned he was like, oh no, guys, the gearbox. And like you, I was there going, he's not going to start the race, is he?
Yeah.
There's going to be something horribly wrong where they're just not even going to be able to get to the grid. And it turned out, or it emerged, that there was possibly something to do with the drive shaft, something to do with the rear left of the car. At first, they didn't think it was anything to do with the accident. Then later on, just before we were recording this, they're saying, oh, maybe it does have something to do with the accident. So there's a whole saga surrounding that, and it was very unfortunate for Charles. But I think he showed excellent resolve, and obviously congratulated his teammate. He was there at the end of proceedings as well. You'd think being at home, maybe he didn't feel the need to go back and have a little cry in his trailer or whatever, because he was basically already at home anyway. But yeah, Leclerc, tough weekend. I thought he showed some good composure though, and I can't deny that I'm not a Ferrari fan. I'm not necessarily a Leclerc fan, but I really like him as a driver. I think he is absolutely superb. He's one of the best wheel-to-wheel drivers on the grid. I was very happy for him to do so well, and I'm glad to see Ferrari back in the mix as well. They are back in business.
Yeah, and hopefully next week a similar circuit, a much higher top speed, but still a street circuit nevertheless. You've got Sector 1 and Sector 2, which are very Monaco-esque. And then you got Sector 3, which is just a huge back straight. But that Ferrari isn't slow anymore. They've bounced back. They've had some decent finishing positions this year, finishing 4th or 5th on a handful of times. So let's see what they can do at a hugely, well, I wouldn't say a massive power circuit, but it definitely has that huge back straight, doesn't it? Which is over a kilometre long, which is ridiculous when you think about it. And see what speeds these guys will get up to. But I'm excited just to see those drivers back at the top of the grid fighting for the podium positions, because you take out Lewis and Bottas out of the equation and we're ended up with this amazing podium of Verstappen, Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris again. And I love seeing a different podium. I really do. But let's just, let's just keep on plodding along. It's good. I like it. I like what's happening this season. It's going well.
It's strange that we should have a race that in its content was relatively uneventful, but its implications
is huge
for the standings and just for the kind of, like you say, the kind of vibe of the championship as a whole. Very, very significant. And yeah, a very mixed up podium with no Mercedes on the podium. And, much of the image has been shared of, back when it was Vettel that won, Alonso second, Button third. Very different kind of time when we had a Red Bull, a Ferrari, and a McLaren on the podium. But I just think that, it's very strange that it wasn't a super exciting race, but its implications are massive. More of this going forward, I hope. Right, let's go over to our view from the stands, where you've got in touch with us either via Twitter or via email, and we see what you think and have a little chat about your comments and questions. And this week we're going to kick off with RPM legend Dave Doherty, who asks us about our thoughts on Norris's P3 and his form, which is a good point because I think that in terms of current form, Lando Norris is one of the best drivers on the grid. He is absolutely killing it right now, and we'll talk more about the standings later, I'm sure, but he's now P3 in the championship and seems to be pretty intent on staying there. His performances have been so consistent. I knew that he was getting more confident. I knew that he was getting better, and I said earlier that on paper, that combination of Lando and Daniel in the McLaren is unbelievable and has such huge potential. Maybe even the potential to be a little bit of a clash between them, because there could be a very intense rivalry to be had there. It remains to be seen, but it could happen. But he's doing even better than I thought he would. And to get another podium at Monaco is indicative of just how well he is doing and how he has really got that McLaren together, and it is looking like his team in the same way that Verstappen is Red Bull at the moment. As things stand, Norris is really commanding that other side of the garage.
Yeah, I completely agree. Obviously, the weekend started off with Norris announcing a multi-year contract deal with McLaren, and I was a little bit surprised at this because he's committed. I think is it for another 3 years?
I don't know if we know exactly how long it is, but they say multi-year. So.
And obviously, McLaren aren't at the top at the moment, but to commit to a team for a couple more years and have that much faith, I thought, okay, that's good. But also, there's a lot of spots opening up. Mercedes have got some question marks around their drivers. Red Bull obviously got a new driver lineup at the moment with Perez. How long will Perez stay with that team? So I thought actually committing to a couple more years with McLaren is a really bold move, and I wondered if he had sold himself a little bit short, because he's definitely, like you said, one of the best drivers on the grid at the moment and has the potential to win multiple races with his racecraft.
I'm a little bit upset that you would suggest he'd sold himself short by staying at McLaren. Little bit hurt by that.
But McLaren haven't won a race in the last 5-6 years. Whereas there are teams,
a few years ago,
Ferrari,
they were bottom of the grid.
Absolutely. I completely agree. But I thought, you know what? You have no idea where the next couple of years are going to go. Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull have all won races in the last year. Maybe not Ferrari, but in the last 2 years, definitely. So I thought, maybe he's just sold himself a little bit short. Maybe he should have kept his options open. And then bang, this weekend, P3, Monaco, another podium of the year. And all those doubts or all those worries went straight away. And I thought, you know what? Brilliant. He's done it. P3 at Monaco with McLaren. Why was I worried? Why was I worried that he was staying with McLaren? And that's nothing against McLaren itself. But until McLaren get their first race win, I'll always be a bit, what could he do? What could he do with another team? But you know what? He's on brilliant form. P3 is it's another podium. It's another P3. There's only a matter of time before that's P2. And then it's only a matter of time before he gets the first race win with McLaren. And that will be an amazing podcast, because you'll just see massive smiles on both Alex and I's face for the whole podcast. Could be a really boring race, but it will just be grinning throughout the whole thing. But yeah, Norris on superb form and just incredible stuff at the moment.
Yeah, he's been in the top 5 4 times in the last 5 races.
Yeah,
so
that's
2
amazing.
podiums. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Dave. We always appreciate you replying to our tweets. It's great conversation points. And we've got another frequent tweeter, which is Riley Gale 33. Max now has the advantage after Lewis lost lots of points. What is the lowest finish Max will get all season in your opinion, not including a DNF? Now, I thought this was a really interesting question, and especially that last bit as well, not counting a DNF, because last year Red Bull had a couple of DNFs with Max,
You got a few of
and
those, didn't he?
that really hurt his championship standings. It almost took, well, that did ultimately take P2 away from him at the end of the year. I think he had 5 DNFs last year compared to Bottas's 2 or 3. So definitely hurt him. On one note, I really hope they don't have any DNFs this year because that would really hurt the championship. It's a great battle at the moment, and I hope it stays that way. But how low do I think Max will finish out of the whole season? I spent a lot of time thinking about this question because if you had asked the same about Lewis, I would have probably said P4. But here we are at the end of Monaco and he finished P7 because of the characteristics of the track and what a bad qualifying session can do. Now, we have a couple more tracks coming up where qualifying is quite important, Singapore being one of them. And Baku, again, very street circuit, Sector 1 and Sector 2. The real overtaking opportunity is along that back straight. So, I would like to say P5 will probably be his lowest finishing position, and that would be a freak accident in qualifying where he's for whatever reason only finished in Q2 or he's out in Q2 and he manages to fight his way back up the grid, because we've seen great things with Perez coming from the back, well, not coming from the back of the grid, but coming from P10 or P9 and finishing just shy of the podium. And I think if Max ends up having a bad qualifying session, he'll get up into the top 5 at least. So yeah, no lower than P5 is my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's when you look at his record as well. That seems about right, because when he doesn't retire, he's on the podium. That's his recent form pretty much. Last year at Turkey, I think he was P7, P6, something like that.
Okay,
they were having a bit of a difficult time of it there. He was a little bit impatient when trying to get past Perez. I think it was. That was in the wet. He was coming into the slipstream and he got a little bit greedy and got onto the slippery runoff.
Oh, and spun,
and went round. That kind of hurt his chances a little bit. But otherwise, yeah, when he doesn't DNF, he pretty much finishes on the podium and certainly in good points. So, yeah, I think lowest finish kind of on merit, P5, seems likely. Maybe there's a chance maybe Red Bull will get the unbelievable will happen and Red Bull will get a pit stop wrong. They'll do a Mercedes. But even the year before, I'm trying to think about 2018. It's hard to think of any time where he wasn't in like the top 6. So yeah, I think P5, P6 is a good shout because he just has that incredible consistency. He understands the car so well. And Red Bull, although they occasionally get strategy a little bit wrong when it comes to taking the win, they certainly know how to do a fast pit stop, and they don't do a Mercedes where they get it all horribly wrong and they go from first place to either completely out of the race or near the back.
Thank you very much for tweeting in. And like usual, at the end of every single race, you can tweet us at RacePerMinute on Twitter and let us know your questions or thoughts, and we will read them out in the show and give you our opinions. And if you're not on Twitter, you can email us at info@raceperminute.com and we shall read out any questions on there as well. Right. Moving on to the juicy bit of the podcast, because we've had a pretty juicy podcast already. We've had a very interesting podcast, but this is where it really gets interesting. Driver of the day and the championship standings. So let's start off with driver of the day, and I'm gonna take the lead if you don't mind.
Do it.
And my driver of the day, I was very torn because a couple of drivers had really good performances. Max Verstappen, great performance to win. So you have to lead. Yeah, he led every single race. He had led every single lap. Flawless performance, didn't hit the wall, and if you need to finish at first, you have to finish. Like, he kept it out of the barriers, especially at Monaco, where he's had a little bit of a bad luck in the past couple of years. Lando Norris gaining 2 positions, doing a great job, and Sebastian Vettel also doing a fantastic job as well. So my driver of the day is in line with the public vote and will be Sebastian Vettel, just because of his performance. The wheel-to-wheel racing going up Sector 1, didn't let off at all, just kept his foot planted and got ahead of Gasly, which is probably whether it was one of the few overtakes we saw on track, but definitely a situation where either driver could have been in the wall. And Gasly said at the end of the race, fair play to Vettel because he raced me hard and just didn't let up at all. And I thought, yeah, fantastic stuff. He could have easily backed out of that and settled for P6, but no, he's still hungry. He's still got it. Seb 5 is back. He is my driver of the day. Maybe overhyped that a little bit, but yeah, really good performance from him and the Aston Martin team as well. Not to take anything away from them because their strategy was brilliant. But Seb had to drive the car and keep out the wall and get past Gasly, and he did all three of those things very well.
Yeah, he certainly did do that and did deserve that. He deserved the driver of the day popular vote at the very least. I understand why people went for that. He definitely did very well. I think you already mentioned Perez, who did very well as well, managed to jump up 5 places. Red Bull got the strategy right, but he also had an excellent outlap and few laps after that. I think Verstappen let him go by so he could be in the free air, and again, very good decision for them. And he took advantage of that. He was able to take advantage of that opportunity and make up a lot of time. So he did very well as well. I do want to give a shout out to Giovinazzi, because whilst he had a pretty uneventful race, the fact that he got the team into Q3 for the first time and got their first points on the board, I think that's a great result for him. And but driver of the day, that's why we're here. I think I'm going to give it to Sainz. He had a strong start to hold off Lando, who was on the inside line. That alone was super important because, that was a really good opportunity for Norris. And obviously I was like, come on, Lando, you got the inside line. You could sweep past everybody if you get it right, trying to like will him into an even better position. But no, Sainz did enough to hold him off. He kept a very respectable pace to Max Verstappen, and at one point was actually chasing him. I think, in fact, I would go as far to say that Sainz put Verstappen under more pressure than Bottas did.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Of course, he had the added pressure of being the only Ferrari in the race. Teammate is nowhere to be found in a race that is so pit stop strategy dependent on gaining any positions at all. Having a teammate who can hold things up for the person behind can make all the difference. Like, for example, Ricciardo was chasing both Alfa Romeos, and Kimi Räikkönen was there to hold him up so that he couldn't get any closer to Giovinazzi or potentially get in his pit window, for example. Sainz didn't have that luxury. I think that he has shown in qualifying as well that he is absolutely within a very reasonable amount of time, to Leclerc. And I think that he had an excellent race and well-deservedly got up on that podium. And it's great to see him looking so much more comfortable in that car now out of so many other drivers who have transitioned to a different team and seem to have suffered. And I suppose Sainz and Vettel are the two people that are coming out of this looking a little bit more content. So Sainz, my driver of the day.
Yeah, it's a really good pick. And how, like I said, I'm not a Ferrari fan. I'm not, I'm just a fan of Formula One. But it was really good to see a Ferrari on the podium. Just seeing them on the podium is great. Seeing those colours up there, it's where I don't want to say it's where they belong, but we've become so used to seeing a Ferrari on the podium over the last decade that actually it's nice to see a driver up there, and especially Sainz as well, new to the team, really showing everyone what he's got. It's just so frustrating to see what that could have been for Ferrari's weekend. They could have had 2 cars on the podium, and they could have been a huge haul of points for the championship, but it wasn't. And he did a fantastic job, especially, like you said, by himself. Didn't have anyone to rely on throughout the race.
Am I right in saying that all 3 of them is their first podium at Monaco?
Yes, yeah.
Because Verstappen has never been on the podium before, I don't think.
And Lando definitely hasn't, and neither has Carlos. So, 3 brand new Monaco podium sitters.
And the second youngest podium ever, I think, as well.
Yeah, I think Max turned around and said, "Cheers, Carlos, you've ruined it for everyone," or something like that. He is a little bit older than the other 2 because they can't all be in their young 20s.
He's ruining their average.
Yeah. Right. So should we move on to the biggest talking point of the weekend, and that is the 2021 drivers' standings, kicking off the top spot with 105 points. Is Max Verstappen for Red Bull Racing Honda, a new championship leader. The first time a Red Bull has led the championship since 2013, and the only other constructor other than Mercedes or Ferrari to do so since that date. Massive step in the right direction.
I'm trying to think when Hamilton wasn't the last person to be in the lead of the driver standings. So that alone is significant.
I think apart from the odd couple of times where we start off in Australia and Bottas has a good race and Hamilton finishes second, but then for the rest of the season it's all Hamilton in the lead. This is big news. This is, like I said, the biggest talking point coming out of the weekend. we can have quite a average race, but yet the implications, like you said, Alex, are massive. That pit stop for both Hamilton and Bottas have played into Red Bull's hands absolutely perfectly, and they did everything they had to do this weekend just to bring home as many points as they could. So Max Verstappen at the top of 105 points, with Lewis Hamilton on 101. So 4 points behind them. Very good call from Mercedes, getting Hamilton to box for fastest lap, trying to scrape those extra point, which is, they have no idea how close this is going to come towards the end of the season. 1 point might be the difference. You never know. We can only hope. Our boy Lando Norris for McLaren Mercedes with 56 points in P3. Just what a guy. Like you said, he's basically that is his team at the moment. He is dominating that team. He's bringing in most of the points, to be honest. Daniel Ricciardo's got 24 and Lando Norris has got 56, so more than double, which is fantastic. And like you said, resecured. He's taken that back off Bottas through no fault of his own, unfortunately. Bottas is back in P4 with 47 points, so a handful of points behind Lando Norris, with Sergio Perez with 44 points. Interesting how I don't want to say the number 2 drivers, because both teams say they don't have a number 1 and a number 2 driver, but how Sergio Perez and Bottas are only 4 points between them. So how much will that play into the championship's hands? I mean, Bottas has had 2 DNFs in the last 5 races. So actually, arguably, you could say Mercedes still have the upper hand, but they have to finish the race to get the points. And at the moment, they are not. Charles Leclerc sat with 40 points. What could have been for him could have had a huge amount of points, which may have put him in P4, but he sat in 6th, with Carlos Sainz with 38 points in P7, Daniel Ricciardo with 24 points in P8, Pierre Gasly 16 points in P9, and Esteban Ocon finishing up the top 10 with 12 points. Alex, you want to do the next 10?
Well, we have Vettel, who's finally got some points on the board, but his 10 actually puts him, double Stroll, or not quite Stroll, sorry, Stroll scored as well, didn't he? But it was previously the case that they'd only scored like 5 points and they were all Strolls, and now Vettel has managed to add significantly to that total, so that's something. Stroll follows him close by. Alonso with 5 points. We were talking about, the idea of the second driver in each team. What we have Verstappen with more than double the points of Perez, Hamilton with more than double the points of Bottas, Norris with more than double the points of Ricciardo, Gasly with more than double the points of Tsunoda, Ocon with more than double the points of Alonso. There's sort of a thing, with the exception of Ferrari, because Ferrari are on 40 and 38, Aston Martin on 10 and 9. So and Williams, 0 and 0. They're really keeping it together.
Massive consistency of Williams.
Yeah. Sadly, yes. Giovinazzi just behind Tsunoda. Tsunoda with 2 points, Giovinazzi with 1. The bottom group, Raikkonen, Russell, Latifi, Schumacher, Mazepin, all yet to score. Alfa Romeo are obviously off the blocks. Let's move this over to our constructor standings, because Alfa Romeo are now that they've scored, they've got their 8th place. If things don't change much, it could stay looking like that bottom 3. We might as well work from the bottom up this time. Haas are where I think we expect them to be. Williams still doesn't look like they're quite yet there to score. I agreed with you that it's like Russell, this is a good chance for him. Mr. Saturday, it wasn't to be. He said that it was where they expected to finish, so maybe this must be perhaps what they anticipated was going to happen. In 7th place, Alpine, 17 points. 18 points, AlphaTauri. 19 points, Aston Martin. We have this really, really hot group in the middle of the pack, followed by a massive fight for P3. I had a feeling this was going to be coming. I said last time that Ferrari, McLaren is back. And here it is, Ferrari 78 points and McLaren 80 points. Just need a little bit more from Daniel Ricciardo to secure. He's sadly lost his point streak. He previously had the longest active point streak on the current grid. Obviously, that's not the case anymore now that he came P12, so no points. And then the fight is up the front close as well, with Mercedes on 148 and Red Bull on 149. So we've got massive fight for P1, massive fight for P3, massive fight for, what will probably be fifth. And then at the very bottom, can anybody score at any point?
Yeah,
so
that is the fight for the bottom.
It's these clusters of competition. You couldn't ask for much more competition-wise from the standings, both drivers and constructors right now. It is really, really heating. Really, really heating.
It is hugely exciting that there's a huge amount of money, like the difference between P10 and P8 in the Constructors' Championship is millions and millions and millions of pounds. All very important for the bottom three teams, and all they have to do is score a handful of points on one freak race, and they will secure that P7 or that P8 or that P9, and they just don't want to be that bottom team. And I honestly think any one of those teams could manage to scrape a point or two, even Haas, if they had a really good and bold strategic weekend, could potentially score or scrape a point if 10 cars DNF in the race as well. But yeah, it's exciting to see that you've got these clusters of teams here all fighting it out. Five races into the year, and it's so close. It is so close. Just imagine if we had a couple more years of these regulations. What could have been? We'll never know. But
it might be
it's
even
exciting
better
times.
They change them.
It may be even better. But for the first time, look at that. Mercedes in P2, not leading either championship, which is just unheard of, especially in the turbo hybrid era. Who knows what's going to happen in Baku, but I'm excited.
Well, thanks very much for joining us for the Monaco Grand Prix post-race discussion. Do send us any more thoughts or questions that you have about this race or anything else F1 related to us at RacePerMinute on Twitter, or of course you can get in touch at RacePerMinute.com. You can email us info@RacePerMinute.com. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you can comment below. If you enjoyed the episode, give us a rating or a like wherever you're getting us, wherever you're watching or listening. If you like what we do, then please consider subscribing to get more wherever it is you're getting Race Per Minute, either on your podcast app or, again, on YouTube. It's all part of feeding the algorithm. We've been doing this a little while now. I don't think either of us have any clue how this algorithm stuff is supposed to work. We're just trying to do the best that we can, and hopefully we'll get pushed by the algorithm gods the algorithm powers that be. But we're relying on you to subscribe if you do enjoy us and you do listen to us regularly. That would really help us out. And if you really, really want to support the show, then you can help us keep the content coming and receive some lovely rewards for yourself by going to patreon.com/raceperminute, where for as little as £1 a month, you can join us on Discord, watch some races with us, get your name featured prominently all over the website and the show. Lots more to be found there. So patreon.com/raceperminute to really show your support would be massively appreciated. So next time, at the end of the next post-race discussion, we could potentially be talking about Red Bull pulling away. It's a sea change in the championship, or it could be back to business as usual and Mercedes once again find a way to dictate the pace. We just don't know, and that is the beauty of this sport, Shane. What do you think of Baku, by the way, as a track?
It's very hot and cold. We've had some massive races there, some hugely controversial races. I remember when Lewis and Seb had that little touch in Sector 3 where Lewis's head restraint became loose and had to box to have it fixed, and Vettel didn't get a very big penalty, or it didn't match up. I like the circuit. I don't like driving it on the game by any means, but I love the circuit as in it's got some decent overtaking opportunities, especially down that back straight. I'm excited to see what teams are strong, because it's almost a mixture between Monza and Monaco. I think I'm most interested to see how Ferrari do, because those two drivers, like you said, they're very consistent with each other, close to each other in the standings. They've got the speed. And they're very good. They were very good through Monaco, so it could be a Ferrari in the top 5 or the top 4. You never know. But I can't wait. It's going to be good. What do you think of the circuit?
I do like Baku. I think it's a good track. Like you say, there's a very strange dynamic between the twisting street circuit and then this colossal back straight. Some good overtaking opportunities, and yeah, I like it. I'm looking forward to it, and we will definitely see whether or not what has happened here in Monaco carries over at all. Is this just a freak result, or does this indicate a real change in the way that the season is going? We shall certainly find out next time. So thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you for Azerbaijan.
See you in 2 weeks.